Noeli, hi, so nice
Hi.
to see you
Nice to see you in person, virtually.
virtually in person. Here we are. I'm just gonna do it so we're both together. So I guess my very first question is, circus artists, we depend on word of mouth, having references and kind of likability from casting directors. I know that when I hire volunteers, something that I take into consideration is not just what type of act do they have, but also what are they like to work with. So I'm wondering what it was like to put up your video, when your first video, and also were you afraid of the repercussions?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like that was the first thing when I was creating that video. I thought to myself, I'm getting blacklisted. I am getting blacklisted by all of these companies because who wants to work with someone who is calling racism out? And especially since Circus is I would like to argue that Circus is the most open-minded part of the entertainment industry, and there is this belief, I believe in Circus, that we are exempt from societal factors like racism and discrimination, and we are open to everybody, and everyone in Circus is a family. And to come in and post a very public video about racism and shatter that belief that Circus is this unified family where there is no discrimination, it's terrifying, especially as a young performer who is really at I believe this is the beginning of my career. And to put out something like that and make people think that they're to have people listen about like racism in Circus and some of my experiences, that was just so terrifying to me. And yeah, I definitely thought that that was the end of my career, to be honest. And so it was really surprising when it wasn't.
I know that when I hear, like when people talk about any community being like a family, sometimes that can be really welcoming, but it can also then, when I have an experience of discomfort, that's even harder because I'm like, oh no, I know that everyone is saying family to mean love and community and consensus and that we all agree. And one, that's not what family always means, but also that makes it feel like if I'm having a problem, I'm actually the problem and it's not that the community is having an issue. So I'm wondering if you would feel willing to share some of those experiences that you had, experiences of racism that you name in that first video.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the very first video, and I'll keep it kind of short here, and if you want to see the extended version, you can go to the video. But basically, I didn't get cast for a role, not because of my skills. The casting director is very apparent, like, you have the skills, you have a great personality, you're likable, and we'd love to work with you, but you don't have the look. And there is intersectionality, where I thought, oh, it's probably my body type, because when you think of an aerialist on stage, you think very, very petite, you think taller, more like if you think of the stereotype of like a ballet dancer, that's what you think of as an aerialist. And I thought, oh, maybe it's my body type. And later on, I would talk to someone else, a male who auditioned as an aerialist and who was dark skinned like me, who was brown like me. And he was like, oh yeah, the director told me that I didn't have the right look because I have a Mediterranean look. And I don't even know what that means, but basically because he was brown skinned. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I would later meet, this is so funny because this was in the span of like 3 or 4 years where I would meet these people. And later on, I would meet a Black acrobat who is on the show. And his role was solely to tumble. And if you could do other skills within the production, then you could fill in for other backup roles. And so he became proficient at those skills, those other skills, and went to the director and said, hey, like, can I try to be a backup? I can show you the skills, and I think you've seen some of them, you know, I can do it, and like I would love to back up. I know like the choreography. And the director said, no, you are not the right look for that, for those roles. And it's just so apparent that it was because of his skin color, and it wasn't because he wasn't proficient at any of the skills. It wasn't his body type, because he had a similar body type to others. So it's just this, that is definitely one where I was like, wow, I really didn't get the role because of my skin color. And there are other experiences where, you know, I've taken a note from my Filipino parents. They always said, you know, keep the blinders on no matter what anybody says to you. You keep the blinders on, you keep going, you work hard, and that's how you get to where you want to be. And they didn't expect me to become a circus performer, but I applied that principle to circus. And so in training studios, I know in the first video I say I haven't had any experiences with racism in studios, but you know, when you further reflect, especially after doing my docuseries, UPRISE, where I talked to a bunch of BIPOC artists, when you reflect on your own experiences, you start to realize, oh, you know, I did have microaggressions too, and I just normalized it because that's how I thought that I needed to do that in order to get where I wanted to be. I had to normalize those experiences and shake those experiences off, even if they did feel a little icky at the time, because I just knew that if I just kept my head down, didn't talk back to anyone, didn't cause any controversy, that is how I'm going to be able to be a performer. Because as I think that everyone in circus knows, it is about likability, how likable you are. And like, that's what people want to work with. And so one of the microaggressions I had in a circus studio, and, you know, I love this coach. So I still love this coach. And this coach has invested in me and believes in what I can do. But there was an instance where I was training with this coach, and music pops on, and well, it shuffles through, you know, but like this certain music came on, and it was very Asianic sounding. So he's like, oh, this is the music of your people, says it really loudly in front of like a bunch of people. This is the music of your people. And then he starts doing like an Asian sort of dance to like emphasize that that's how Asian people dance, and this is your music of my people. and then there were a few other people in the room, and their mouths dropped, and then my mouth was like, oh, like this isn't the music of my my people. and the other people were kind of looking at me as a cue, like, oh, should we say something? And you know, I just kind of laughed it off, so everyone laughed it off. And then you know, after my lesson, I would later like go get a drink of water, and my friend would come up to me and say, hey, Noeli, that wasn't cool what this coach did. You know, this person, we love this person, but we're normalizing these racist experiences or these racist comments of this person because this person is deemed so highly in our industry, and because, you know, we depend on this person to get us to where we want to go in our skill level and in our careers. And you know, and my friend was like, you know, we really should tell this person it's not okay to say these racist comments. And I, being pretty dumb, was like, no, it's fine. Like, it, you know, this is normal. It's just a joke. It's unintentional. He didn't mean it. It's and that that is sort of how I've lived my life, I think my whole life, sort of just normalizing these experiences so that I can, because I believe that's how I'm going to reach success. And now looking back, I'm like, man, my friend was looking out for me. She's a real one. Like that that was a conversation that should have been had that day.
Yeah, I mean, it's, for Clowns Without Borders, our whole work is how to use humor in difficult situations. How can we offer levity as a way to address or redirect pain, trauma, a really difficult experience. And the dangerous side of that is, I think that it's something that a lot of us really internalize and sometimes use humor or use the like, I'll just laugh it off. That's my fake laugh, clearly. That's my polite laugh. My real laugh is much too big. That idea of like, oh, I'll just laugh it off, or like, if I smile at you, I'll let you know that we're still okay. And that's such a hard position to be in, especially because and something you talk about are all of those power dynamics of who owns studios, who is coaching, who are the people who can get you in the room.
Yeah.
And anyone on Facebook Live, you can see in the comments where we're putting in links to UPRISE, which is Noeli's docuseries, where she interviews an incredible array of BIPOC circus performers, circus owners, and also producers. Noeli, what inspired you to start that series?
Yeah. So that series is a really big endeavor for me. And it's still going. Um, and what inspired me to start that series is because in my journey as a circus performer, I've been to a lot of studios, I've been to a lot of different performances, and it was just so apparent to me that there isn't a lot of circus artists of color that I saw out there, and I didn't have someone who who I, who I could see as a mentor who is a circus artist of color. And then George Floyd sadly got murdered, and the Black Lives Matter movement happened. And throughout Instagram, there was like this tag called Amplify Melanated Voices, and suddenly all of these like brown and black um, circus artists came to the forefront, and I'm like, who are these people? Why haven't I met them before? Basically. And then we started connecting in that way. And what I realize is that there are circus artists of color out there. It's just our voices aren't heard, and our stories aren't shared, and we're not really seen in circus. And that is something that I'm very acutely aware of whenever I go into a studio, or whenever I go see a live performance, or whenever I am performing myself. I am one of a handful, literally like one handful of circus artists of color on stage or in a studio usually. And to realize that there are more of us, it's just we're not being heard. That is just, it's heartbreaking to me. And that's why I decided to start this docu-series, so that these circus artists who are leaders in this industry, who are amazing people in this industry, so that their voices could be heard, and their stories, and crazy stories, can be shared, and so that we remember these people too, and we just don't highlight the the leaders in our industry who I'm just gonna be frank, who are mostly white. Like, and yeah, I just wanted their voices to be documented. Very much the same with Veronica Blair, who created the Uncle Junior project and is amplifying amazing Black circus performers. And if anyone's watching this, you should check that out too. And yeah, just very much the same as her, where I didn't want circus artists of color's voices to go unheard any longer. And especially also I wanted them to be able to say, hey, this is what has happened to me. This is my incredible story and these are my achievements. And this is what I want to change in our industry. Because I think action is really, really important, and being able to put actionable steps out there so that people can um, help build a more inclusive environment in circus. I think having actionable steps to take is really important. So yeah.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about some of those actionable steps and also the bravery of both wanting to be in an industry and wanting to change it. And because that's pretty huge. You're not saying, hey, I'm done now that I've had my career. Here's how I think you all should change it. If anyone on Facebook Live has any questions, please type them in. And I want to sort of tap back to one of the first experiences you shared, and this place where racist comments are often coded as aesthetic comments, right? Where we hear someone say, well, like, oh, well, the show has a really specific look. And maybe that look is like, oh, it's supposed to be medieval, or it's like a pixie village. It's something that Veronica Blair really talks about in the world of Ariel, this ballet tradition where comments are often talked about as line, which is something that of course is important to work on, but where we get stuck in these ideas of aesthetic or body type, which is exclusionary. And so I'm wondering if you have anything to add about that, if any of the people you've interviewed have shared comments where aesthetic comments, is something that was a racist comment was coded as being about aesthetics.
Yeah, totally. There were quite a few people. So Veronica was really my light bulb moment. I'm like, oh my gosh, like you're completely right. That when we look at a line for like acrobats and aerialists, it's really centered around a Eurocentric look, basically. A Eurocentric ballet line. That is what is deemed desirable in circus and in dance and just entertainment in general. and someone else that made this comment as well is Marco Motta. And if you ever see his work oozes with so much artistry and so much like passion, and he has a story, like a really, really, really horrific, honestly, story about racism just throughout his whole life. And if anyone wants to check that docuseries episode out, I highly recommend it because his story is so powerful, and he puts that story in each of his pieces, which is incredible, to have the capacity to put that much emotion on stage and live that truth, I guess, is the best way I can say it. But yeah, he's someone I really regard very like highly in this industry, and he obviously is very, very skilled at what he does, but he always gets dinged on his technique, is what they said. Like, oh, you have poor technique, you need to work on your technique. And he makes this distinction. He's like, okay, is it technique or aesthetic? And he says it really funny. He says, technique is basically, can you do the skills and not get injured? Like, are you capable of, or have you learned how to do the skills in a way that, won't cause injury? It's in a safe way. And then there's aesthetic, which is way more subjective. It's are your toes pointed a certain way? Do you have that nice handstand line that everybody wants? And how oftentimes he has definitely seen that this aesthetic is that European ballet looking line. And then Majo actually touches that later, and she says something so brilliant. I never thought about this before. So she said in her in her episode that, you know, ballet is the basis, or ballet is not the basis of dance. Ballet is the basis of European white dance, basically. And it's so true. And that's something that I normalize too. And I think that a lot of people have normalized that this ballet line that came out in the 15th and 16th century is not the oldest form of dance. It's just the dance that we have made very fundamental in the circus industry, in dance too. Like if you go, like as an American, if you go to a dance class, they'll say, oh, like you have to start with ballet and then you can branch out to other forms. Whereas ballet and hip hop, they have nothing to do with each other. Like, and it's just this, it's just this realization that ballet is, and this European aesthetic has been normalized and been regarded as desirable in regards to other types of dances. It's just, I don't know, that was a crazy realization for me.
Something that came up in your interview with Bill Forchion is he talked about an experience where a casting director told him that he wasn't cast because if he was cast, and Bill is a Black man, that if he was cast in the role, then the casting director would always have to cast that part as a Black man, and the casting director was concerned that he wouldn't be able to find other Black performers to replace that role. And so that, I mean, there's so much to talk about there. One is this idea that there could only possibly be one exceptional Black clown to be cast in that role. And then also this idea that once a role is cast, it needs to always be replaced by someone of the same race or the same look, if we're using that nice language. And there's this really hard dichotomy in circus of, on one hand, being told to be exceptional, being told to be singular, having an act that's just yours, and on the other hand, having the skills, the technique to be cast in a lot of different roles. And this idea of being cast in a role that can be replaceable, being able to fill in when someone leaves the show, being able to fill in. I don't have a great question to end that, but I guess around this question around kind of this being singular versus being interchangeable, and how that plays out in creating opportunities. I know that's something you talked about in your series with casting directors.
Yeah. So I'll tell you another sort of personal experience too. Just in my journey as becoming a circus performer, a coach was actually very upfront with me, and I actually think this was, you know, one of the most insightful things about learning about circus, and what is put on stage. She said to me, you know, Noeli, you, and there's going to be some intersectionality as well with this. She said, you know, Noeli, you are darker skinned than most, and you are short, and you are like stockier. So you might do well. You're probably going to do better as a soloist than as an ensemble member, because no one will be able to fit you into their ensemble. But also, with that being said, as a soloist, and especially since you're an aerialist, to be honest, there isn't a lot of darker skinned aerialists that are being cast, and especially your look is different, and you're more of like this powerhouse looking performer. They might take you for straps. Straps is an I don't know if there's non-circus people listening, but it's an apparatus where basically like you do a lot of hard tricks. It's usually like like shorter, stockier men that do that, I guess, muscular men that do straps, right?
To be clear for anyone who's watching, it's not like it's easy to do other aerial apparatuses. Yeah. It looks that way. In straps, there tends to be more of an aesthetic of like really showing that there's a you can see that someone is lifting themselves the whole time.
Yeah.
It's easy to be seduced into thinking that maybe someone is just sitting on a trapeze. That's not the case either.
that's not the case. That's definitely not the case. Thank you for clarifying that. Yeah, that's not the case. Every aerial apparatus is difficult. Like you have to have a certain level of upper body strength for sure, and core strength, and yeah, all of it is difficult. But yeah, there's definitely stereotypes that play into the different apparatuses too. So when I ended up finding rope, everyone's like, oh yeah, that's a good fit for you because you look like a rope artist, like, so that's the strange thing about Circus, is that there's these different stereotypes of what a porter, a bass looks like when usually he usually throws the girl up in the air, and the girl is usually like a flyer is usually a woman who is very petite and small. So there's these different stereotypes that come into play. And I guess, yeah, that was just, at the time that this person said this, like, you might do well as a soloist, but then there's the factor of being an aerialist who is like brown and a different sort of look than what is normalized, I guess. But yeah, definitely ensemble work is going to be harder for you to fit in a cast. And at the time I was kind of mad. I'm like, no, that's not true. Like I can do whatever I want to do. And then I would go out and audition and I would later realize, like, oh my gosh, that is a thing. And there was actually this one is more about body type than with race, but there was this one instance where at an audition, I'm laughing it off because it's because I hate talking about this, but I want to talk about it because I think it's important to talk about. There was an audition where, I want to make this very clear too, there were 2 people of color in the room out of 30, I believe, 25 or 30. So that's another thing as well. And it was like a selected audition. So you had to put in an audition to get into the audition, basically. And so there were 2 people of color out of 30. And they had to, we were kind of stripped down into like a sports bra, like little tiny black shorts, like Spanx shorts. And then they had to measure us. This is at the very beginning of the day. So they had to measure our like bust, our hips, and our waist and our hips. And when the person, so it was a man who measured me, it was a man who measured my hips. And he told there was another woman who was a dancer choreographer there. And he said the measurement to the woman, and the woman was like, really? Like, that's her measurement, basically. And I was just, and this is at the beginning of the day before I even showed my skills. And she was like, really? And then the man was like, yeah, that's her measurement. And she was like, oh. And that was like the first judgment of the day of me, without seeing any of my skills or what I could do or how strong I am or my flexibility or anything. It was just already that like pre-judgment. And then we had a height test where we had to stand next to the dancer choreographer. But at the time I didn't understand what that meant. I was like, why are we taking pictures next to this like woman? And then my friend's like, no, this is a height test. I'm like, what's a height test? And it's basically to make sure that we look good next to a person who has that dancer height, I guess, so that when we're on stage, we all look cohesive. And that is something that I've been really upset about as a performer, because usually, at least in my experiences, like if it is about skill, then I'm like, oh, okay, then that's fine. Then it's about skill. But in most of these instances, it's been, you have the skill, but we want everyone to look the same. So, bye.
Yeah, it's something I know that that came up, and it's something that Majo Cázares talked about is this idea, like this fear of like, oh, but what if an ensemble you have one person look different, or two people look different, and this lure of uniformity, oh wow, I now can't say that word. The lure of having everyone look the same. And of course, especially in circus, where what we're striving for is this sense of awe and wonder and possibility. Even there, I think it's especially heartbreaking to then see that we have this idea that like, oh, but then to cast someone who's flying, you know, to cast someone on a swinging trapeze, that has to be a petite woman. We have these ideas, these biases and stereotypes that we reinforce, instead of trusting that, of course, audiences will be excited and inspired by seeing difference. You know, why is it important to create an ensemble where everyone's the same height when what everyone is doing is exceptional? Why look for sort of that mundane? Why choose that as the bar?
Yeah.
Anyone on Facebook Live, if you have questions, let us know. So the next piece is, Noeli, you talked a little bit about how you were afraid of the repercussions. And over the past 3 months, I want to know what's happened since you've posted that first video, since you've started creating UPRISE. What have the repercussions been?
Yeah, so that has been really, really interesting. So I didn't get blacklisted actually. Well, I don't think I got blacklisted. Maybe I did get blacklisted in some companies, but what has happened actually is definitely, I'll talk about the good stuff first, and then I'll talk about the bad stuff. But the good stuff that has been happening, and it's an overwhelming amount of good stuff, is that there was an overwhelming amount of support and love from people around the world. So I actually looked at like the analytics, and also just like, because you can see analytics on the YouTube videos and see where people come from. It's been to like the UK, it's been to Brazil, it's been to Africa, it's been to the Netherlands and like Finland and Switzerland. Like it's been to a lot of different places. And what has been so cool, and the leading factor of why I put out that video is really because, and this outweighed all of my fears. This why that I had outweighed all of my fears of getting blacklisted. And the reason why I put out this video is because I knew that if I felt that there is discrimination, that there is racism in circus, and you know, that this is actually a thing, and that I'm not crazy, like this, there is racism in circus. I knew other people felt the same way too. Somewhere out there, I knew people felt the same way, where they couldn't talk about racism in circus because, you know, they felt like they were crazy, because as we talked about before, circus is a family, and when you're in this family sort of setting, you're crazy if you think that there is any sort of discrimination, whether it's age, body type, racism, like all of that. Like if you think otherwise from this family ideal, then and it drives you mad. And that's something that I definitely felt, and I knew that if I felt that way, there were other circus artists of color that probably felt the same way too. And, you know, I think this is actually one of the most like beautiful changes, is that when I made that video, there were so many people, circus artists of color, and also circus artists who don't have the body type, the look of a circus artist as an aerialist acrobat. That's mainly like the categories I fall into. So like those are the people I tend to like bring in, I think. Just all of these people came into like my messages and emailed me and commented below my video and said, "You're right. Like there is definitely discrimination in circus, especially with racism, and no one was talking about it. Thank you for talking about it." And and you know it, and the most beautiful thing is circus artists of color that came to me and said, hey, I don't feel alone anymore. Like I don't feel, and I think that makes me like teary eyed talking about it, but I think that was just like the biggest thing for me, is that to know that they didn't feel alone anymore, and that they felt like somebody was coming to bat for them basically, and that they felt like they were, that by me speaking out, it's like their voice was also being heard too. And it also gave them the courage to speak up in their own communities. And those people are changing their own communities, which is so crazy to think about. And yeah, people will come back to me and say, hey, like I did this in my community, and people were receptive. And I genuinely think things are going to change now. And so that was something that was really, I don't know, that was something that was very beautiful for me. So I needed to share that up front first, is that I'm just so happy people don't feel alone. And that was so cool. But another thing that has happened, and this is on a like a bigger scale, is that um I'm a young performer, and never would I have thought that I would be entering into conversations um in with American circus company owners and circus company owners and studio owners as well, and talking to them about race and equity and inclusion. And I was vague in the videos before, but now I think I can talk about it. So there is this sort of coalition of circus companies and circus schools forming, and it is now called the American Circus Alliance. So that, I guess that's some news to like share.
Yeah.
And so that is still in the works and everything, but we actually have a name for our organization, and it's a bunch of like company owners and circus school owners in America coming together to tackle different issues in circus, in regards to like funding and getting circus more well known within the entertainment industry, and really like coming to bat for circus. And but also the important topic about race came up, and so I feel very honored to be a part of this discussion with people who have decades and decades of experiences ahead of me. And it's been really just like an honor to be able to feel welcomed in the room, and to be able um to say what I think as well. And there are definitely other um BIPOC artists who are part of this group. Veronica Blair, actually, Bill, Joe, people that Jonathan Lee Iverson, people that I interviewed on my docuseries are also part of this group. And so that is something that we are trying to tackle right now, is how we can make circus, at least in America, like where you know, my home base, I guess, is make it more equitable and have more representation within our industry. And so we're in the beginning talks of that. So obviously not everything's fleshed out and everything, but it's cool to be part of that conversation, and to be in that conversation when I don't own anything really, except my YouTube channel.
And your rope.
And my rope. I have my rope. That's true. I have my rope.
Wow. So one of the things that you pointed out is the sort of the need for change happening at a few different levels. There's the casting directors, the circus owners, and then also with studios, schools, and educators. I know that you're presenting at the American Circus Educators Conference next week. And I'm wondering, when you think about education, what are your some either practical tips for educators or your wishes for how circus education can be either more inclusive or more race aware?
Yeah, totally. So I think a lot of people don't think about racism when it comes to like circus schools because it's so apparent on our stages. But when we think about it, what is being put on our stages is because of the training that we have in our schools. And and so I think one thing is to keep in mind your unconscious bias. So these are the stereotypes that we have in our head about different groups of people, and it's unconscious, it's unintentional. But I think as a circus educator myself, and a question that I would like to pose for other circus educators is, who are the students that you invest in, like really invest your time in, and you want to see them succeed? Um, and what direction do you steer them to? So talking to to Bill Forchion, for instance, he completely redirected his career from clowning to an acrobat. He says that in his interview, where he's like, there are no black clowns. Now he's going back into clowning, but he said there are no black clowns. Like, he's like, yeah, I could do it locally, but like if I wanted to be in a bigger company like Cirque du Soleil, for instance, I cannot be a clown. So he actually went to he studied at San Francisco. Oh, I'm gonna get this wrong. Circus Center, I believe it's called. Yes, okay, cool. And under Master Liu Yi, and he became very proficient at acrobatics and basing, because he's a really strong dude. So he based like 4 highs or 5 highs, I believe. I don't know about the 5 high, definitely a 4 high. And you know, the reason why he didn't pursue clowning in order to get into those, to that big company in particular, is because there are no black clowns. And he's right. He was right. I think he still is right, to be honest. Like, I don't think there are a lot of women clowns like you either. Like, I don't, are there?
Well,
Are there more women clowns?
Yeah, so I think it's one of those places that's like where, like, what we see. And if we I think if we're only looking at the top, if you're only looking at like a few companies as the measure of what is available, you don't see it. I know for some clowns, the in circuses that require or have full makeup of no skin showing, then I mean that is truly whitewashing in the simplest way. And so you see that I think that it unfortunately becomes a positive feedback loop of, right, it's like, as soon as you think, oh, but are there any female clowns, then like once you have that thought, you can either go in the direction of like, well, of course there must be, why have I not seen them on stage, or to this question of like, oh no, well, that I've never seen it, it can't exist. And I think that's something that your channel does so well, is for anyone who's asking that question of like, oh, but are there BIPOC circus artists? Yes, of course, and you talk about that moment of feeling alone yourself, and it's that place that it's like, and why anyone who's watching, I really recommend UPRISE and Noeli's channel, because it's such an incredible introduction to companies and performers and other projects that are about amplifying and also spotlighting artists who maybe we don't notice, right? Or if there's one POC performer in a show, like maybe at the end of the show, that's not the person you remember, right? And so anyways, yes.
Yeah. And thank you for educating me on that, because I don't know much about clowning, so I'm happy to learn. And going back to this idea of unconscious bias and where you steer your kids into, I know, I just from like Korri is another person who said that when he walks into a room, they think of him like, oh, you're black, you're an acrobat. And he's like, no, I'm an aerialist. He is a good acrobat. I think he's being a little modest, but like, he's like, no, I'm an aerialist. and these are the roles that coaches are also steering their kids into like, oh, you look this way, so you're going to be like an aerialist. You look this way, you're going to be an acrobat. You look this way, you're going to be a juggler, or you're going to be a flyer, you're going to be a porter. And what this does for a student, and I've definitely felt this myself, is that it limits their potential. That person could have been the greatest clown, the greatest Black clown there was. That person could be could be so much more than what bubble you placed on them. And I think it limits the capacity for that student to reach their potential. And I think that is so sad, especially if they wanted to go a different direction in their career, but now they're placed in this certain direction because that's how they've been trained and that's all they know. So
yeah. And such an important reminder, I think, for teachers of any art form is also this question of when to ask a student to specialize and when not to, and how to really encourage and let the student lead in terms of finding and following their interest. And certainly that's not just in circus, but of not having that piece that's like, oh well, I know that next year the cellist is graduating, so I'm gonna make sure I can find an incoming freshman to play the cello in a high school orchestra, and really trying to have that humility as an educator to see the student for who they are, and ask, where do you want your creativity to take you?
Yeah.
Noeli, I know you just said you're not a clown, but we have a question that we ask everyone. So here we are, which is, who is your clown? And either you can just try answering that without being a clown, or what's your secret superpower? What's something that you maybe don't think of always as being a strength, but is actually a strength?
Oh, I have to think about this.
Okay.
Can I ask you first, and then we come back to me?
Okay, great. Wait, this is okay. So, well, my clown really really wants to do things really well, and is like super focused on getting things right, but can never do anything right. And something that I don't think of as being a superpower in real life, but definitely impacts my clowning, is I often will blush like bright red. I think I might. I don't know if now I'm doing it. My camera.
No, you're good. You're good.
I'm good. It's that moment where I'll do something and I'll like, boom, go scarlet, and I'll then try to be like, can anyone see that I'm having feelings about this? So I think that's my my clown self, but also one of my secret strengths, which sometimes doesn't feel like a strength, is having big feelings.
Oh, I love that. Okay. So I think my so I don't do much clowning, but maybe I'm gonna start a new career in clowning. But I imagine my clown would be someone who would fake it till you make it. So it would just be, I would probably just like be on stage trying to do like the craziest stuff and just completely failing at all of it, but then like coming out and being like, yeah, I just did that, I'm just so awesome. I would just like walk around and strut the stage and just be like, yeah, I am doing so great right now. So that would probably be my clown. And I actually think that sort of is my superpower is I try not, I don't like the phrase fake it till you make it, but I think something that is my superpower is being adaptive to to whatever situation I'm in. So really rolling with the punches. And that's something that is on rope too. Like if you're an aerialist and you like mess up a rap, like, okay, now you need to like figure out how, like, that shouldn't really happen in a performance, but if it does, like, okay, now you have to like dance your way out and roll with the punches sort of deal. And that's sort of how I've been rolling with the punches during COVID and doing YouTube, where I can't perform live right now, and also getting I guess also going back to your previous question, how has things changed? I've actually been reached out to by more companies to perform for them, like virtually, and like some live performances in the later future where they're like, oh yeah, we would love to hire you. So that was something I was like, what? But yeah, I think I'm really good at being adaptive, and that's my superpower.
Yay! And it's such a great superpower. You went from having a channel that was mostly like training advice to including you still have training advice. Don't worry. Anyone who wants to learn more about rope grip, check out Noeli's channel. As you tell, I've only ever done mime rope. Don't look at me for your aerial advice. But Noeli also has UPRISE, an incredible docuseries about BIPOC voices in circus. And who knows? I think that as I'm excited to see how else your channel adapts. Noeli, thank you so much. Facebook Live, anyone, thank you so much. And please check out Noeli's channel.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.